What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of The Curious Cat. A lot going on lately, so I'm just going to keep firing off these videos. Been living down here on this beautiful lake you see behind me, living off grid in my RV, and yeah, essentially got a little solar set up, so I generate my own power through the solar, and just living really minimalistically, if that's even a word, down on the lake here, and just really trying to grasp what's going on. And there's a few things I want to talk about here. So before I get into it, if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with friends and family who might find this information useful. It helps me get the information out there and helps me wake other people up to what's going on, and helps me to basically get more and more people to wake up and start paying attention to what's going on. And it's a really critical time to be doing that. So with that being said, let's get right into it. A few things I want to discuss is basically what's going on at the war on the middle class. So basically these elite banking cartel, the politicians, all these elitists that run the major corporations and all that, they're all kind of in on this big racket plan, and they're all aware of what's going on, and they're basically destroying the currency, which is destroying the middle class because it destroys the purchasing power of the currency. And that is what the bulk of the middle class are holding, is currency. They have most of their money in savings, and their assets they hold are usually leveraged on debt. So something like real estate, which most North Americans are holding real estate, and they're leveraged with a lot of debt to have these overinflated assets like real estate. And so they're exposed to this debt because now, with the governments coming in and forcing a lot of businesses to shut down, well, how are they supposed to make these mortgage payments? So this is a way where they, in my opinion, they're intentionally crashing the economy. I think they're overplaying the COVID narrative. We've seen there's been a lot of evidence that the lockdowns aren't as effective as they're claiming they are, and that actually these lockdowns are causing a lot more harm, and the economy, the devastation to the economy is going to have a lot more of a lasting effect potentially than COVID. So I don't know, I'm not a scientist, I haven't looked too closely at all the numbers, but I do believe that it's somewhat orchestrated. And you can see that because the elites and the rich are all holding real estate and different assets, like fine art and businesses and all these other things, stock prices and that, which also inflate or go up in value with the money printing. So they are sheltered against the inflation, and the elites ride it up because they're holding these assets. However, the middle class usually aren't holding assets. Even their real estate that they're holding, that they've been told is an asset, isn't really an asset. And I've discussed this in previous videos. I'll maybe make another video in the future about how to tell if your house is an asset or a liability. But a lot of these people are being duped and misled as to their home actually being an asset when it isn't. So a lot of the middle class, and definitely the lower class, but the middle class here in North America, are holding very few assets. They're mostly holding debt. They're holding real estate, which they owe on debt, so they're leveraged with that, and they don't have much in the way of alternative currencies like gold and silver, Bitcoin, that kind of stuff. And so basically they're going to be exposed to this debasement of the currency. And we saw this in Zimbabwe. Anyone who had all their money in the currency essentially got knocked into complete poverty and was forced to basically line up for food. Their currency wouldn't buy them food. It only took a year. They had over 1,000,000% inflation. I think it was like 1.5 million% inflation in 1 year. Prices just went absolutely through the roof, to the point where people were bringing in wheelbarrows of money just to buy a loaf of bread, and essentially the currency became useless. So that is the risk we're running here in North America because of all this money printing. And so basically the elites have somewhat orchestrated this, because what happens is the middle class that own real estate and some stocks and stuff like that, once these elites force us to shut down and they don't allow us to operate our businesses, now people can't afford to pay the minimum payments on their debt. So a lot of people basically get liquidated, or they're forced to sell. And then that puts a lot of downward pressure on these assets. So everyone kind of goes to sell at the same time. That's what I see coming personally in the next couple of years. I think we're going to see a deflation in the real estate market. And I think the bankers, the ones that print all this money, they take the phony money that they create and they come in and they buy up all these distressed assets. So it's basically a big wealth transfer, an orchestrated wealth transfer. And so when we know this, and if you look back through history, they do this every so often. It's cyclical. So they lend out all the money, they make the lending really easy, they make everyone feel rich, and they tell everyone that you can't lose with real estate, it's only going up, so everyone gets into the market. And then they'll crash the economy, or they jack interest rates, or they do something that basically forces everyone to liquidate their assets, and then they come in and they buy up all the distressed assets for pennies on the dollar. And this is what I believe is happening again. And there are ways, once we know this, that we can kind of try and make some plays so that we can essentially do what they're doing, and hopefully we can at least preserve some of our wealth. If not, we can grow our wealth during these times where a lot of people are going to be stuck losing huge portions of their wealth. So that's all going on. The other thing that highlights this what's going on with the currency and the debasement of currency is the amount of currency that the different generations have acquired. So I've talked about this in past videos as well, but the boomers, by the time they hit age 39, had acquired 23% of the world's wealth. Gen X, the following generation, by the time they hit 39, they acquired 7% of the world's wealth. So they only acquired 1/3 of what the boomers did. And this is essentially because the cost of living got more and more expensive because of inflation, but wages never follow inflation. So assets go up with inflation, food, the cost of living, all that goes up with inflation, but wages never follow it. So that's why the Gen X weren't able to accumulate as much wealth as the boomers, because things became more expensive and there wasn't as much opportunity. And now if we fast forward and we look at millennials, the oldest millennial is now 39 this year. So we're able to see how much they have accumulated, and they've only accumulated 2% of the world's wealth. So millennials are in big trouble here. They can't, the ones that did get into real estate, they did it by highly leveraging themselves. A lot of them got parents to co-sign, and now their parents are on the hook for these, $500,000 to $1 million homes that they bought. So that's just huge levels of debt that they're now on the hook for. And real estate is very illiquid. So if markets do turn, it'll be very difficult to sell. And the only way to sell is to keep dropping your price until you find somebody who actually has cash and isn't one of the many who already was over leveraged and totally exposed to debt. So this is why I believe a lot of people are going to get stuck in real estate. I think a lot of the millennials that already bought are soon going to realize how much money that actually is, how much of an obligation they basically signed a contract to make these payments on. I think they're going to realize pretty soon that that's very difficult to pay back these large amounts of money, and that the economy isn't always booming and perfect. We kind of had the perfect situation in the last 10 years for real estate and for markets. We had record low interest rates, we had a booming economy, we had booming real estate, the stock market was going up. It's kind of like what we saw in the 1920s before the Great Depression crash of 1930s. So that's why when I look at history, this really rhymes. The time we're in right now really rhymes to the Roaring 20s. And I think there's a lot of people that are oblivious to this. And I think they're going to get caught with their pants down. I think they're overly exposed on debt. They bought too many toys, too big of homes, took too many trips, didn't put enough money in the bank, didn't diversify into other assets and whatnot. And I think a lot of people will see in the next coming 5 to 10 years what that can do, how vulnerable that can leave you. We kind of had the black swan with the COVID virus breaking out here and basically markets tanking. And now how are people going to afford these high levels of debt? That's my question. So I think that's a lot. That's what's really going on in the market here. Too many people are getting distracted with other stuff, but this is really at the forefront, you guys. This is war. They're attacking the middle class. They're wiping us out, as you can see by the numbers I highlighted and how much wealth is being stolen from the working middle class. And there's ways that we can get around this, and it requires ditching these government currencies and choosing to use alternative currencies like gold, like silver, like Bitcoin, and maybe a handful handful of other cryptocurrencies, but if you're starting to dabble in that, I wouldn't go too far past Bitcoin, as Bitcoin is already enough of a gamble in my opinion. There's only one other crypto that I like that I'll talk about in future videos, but I'm really happy that my largest holding is silver. I love silver that way. Even if the internet goes down, if the governments come in and try and attack Bitcoin, I have it in my hand. I know boomers are going to accept it. A lot of boomers don't like Bitcoin. They don't understand it. It's too techy for them. So I find it's going to be hard to barter with the boomers for Bitcoin. You're going to come in if things get really rough, and your farmer has chicken and food, and you come in and go, oh, I have some Bitcoin. He's not going to want Bitcoin. He might take silver, however. But I think when it really comes down to it, the true currency that has the most value is going to be food, fresh water, and arable land. So we have seen this in the past where people wouldn't even accept silver, because really when it comes down to it, who cares about silver or gold or Bitcoin if you're hungry? You're not going to trade your food if you only have limited supplies of food. You're not going to trade it for any of these currencies. So even investing in these currencies or diversifying in these currencies is only somewhat of a hedge if you have capital that you're trying to protect. However, the most important thing is food security and having, some food resilience in your life. So whether you have a couple freezers full of meat and food and non-perishable items, stuff like that, and maybe you're growing a garden, maybe you know how to hunt and fish and that kind of stuff, all that contributes to food security. And I think that will be number one moving forward as we see food prices skyrocket in the upcoming years because of all this money printing. And basically what's happening is this free money that they're giving out, especially here in Canada, giving out $2,000 a month to 20% of the country, which is just wild. That is a lot of money, and that's 1/5 of the country is collecting this money. And so basically it's devaluing the currency at a record rate. So people that actually have the food and the assets, they're wanting more and more of this phony money because it's so easy to get. You don't have to work hard for it anymore. You just basically go and push one on the telephone 3 times and they credit your account with $2,000. I mean, that's just, there's no value in that. So there's value in gold and silver because you actually have to go and mine it. And that's why people are fleeing to these hard assets like gold, like silver, like Bitcoin. So take some time, learn about these other assets, why they offer some properties of what's termed hard money, why they don't inflate away, why the governments can inflate them away like the paper money, and why that will offer you some kind of hedge against this basically blatant robbery that they're stealing the wealth from the middle class. So I hope that all makes sense to you guys. Please, as always, leave some comments below. I love to hear what you guys are thinking, what you're doing, your thoughts on all that. With that being said, God bless, have a wonderful day, and I hope you're doing well wherever you are.